and considering its size, I'd say that Yahweh has a lot to do with that. You know, it talks about how if the blessing is on you, one person will put 1,000 to flight. You know, it's supernatural what Yahweh does with small things. Oh, look at this church, okay? You know, in a few weeks we'll be doing our annual report of the congregation, and Mom and I were talking about it the other day. It's amazing how much giving comes out of this congregation to bless not only the community, the nation, but nations of the world, and how much Yahweh has placed inside of us this love for Israel, the love for the Jewish people, and how it just really is part of who we are. It's part of our heartbeat. So quite appropriate that he's talking about how Israel is ranked in the nations of the world, because this Torah portion for this week has to do with Israel, Jacob, doing the blessing on his sons as he's going to die. So let's turn to Genesis chapter 47. This is also the last Torah portion in Genesis. Genesis 47 the Torah portion starts at verse 28. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so Jacob reached the age of 147 years. It's quite a good long life. When the time drew near that Israel must die. So notice in this Torah portion how many times it interchanges Israel and Jacob. It keeps switching between the two of them. So it's like showing his spiritual strength and the naturalness of him in one. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal loyally and faithfully with me. Do not bury me, I beg of you, in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place." And Joseph said, "I will do as you have directed." Then Jacob said, "Swear to me that you will do it." And he swore to him, and Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. So again, this just interesting how it's in this last part of Jacob's life, it's interchanging the Jacob and Israel. It goes through chapter 48. Sometime after these things occurred, someone told Joseph, "Behold, your father is sick." And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and went to Goshen. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel collected his strength and sat up on the bed. So it's like interesting. He's and this isn't really where we're going today, but he's on his deathbed. But when he finds out that Joseph's coming, it says Israel collected his strength. We know that Joseph is a foreshadowing of Yeshua, the Messiah. He's a type and a shadow of Yeshua coming into Israel. So it's appropriate that it says Israel gathered his strength and sat up on the bed when Joseph was coming. So it's the foreshadowing of the Messiah himself coming. And Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me and said to me, 'Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make you a multitude of people and will give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession.'" An interesting thing to note is most translations say a multitude of people. The literal translation is the goyim, the nations. I will make the nations, which we'll see in a little bit. "And now your two sons, he's speaking to Joseph, your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. I am adopting them, and now as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine." Very interesting. Again, this isn't where we're going here, but he says that the Lord has spoken to him and said that I'm going to multiply you and I'm going to bring a multitude of the nations to you. And now you have these sons, which really Ephraim and Manasseh were not full-blooded Israelites. They were half Egyptian. Joseph had them in Egypt. They spoke the Egyptian language. They were completely in the culture of Egypt. But Jacob's coming here and saying, I'm going to adopt them in, graft them into the tribes, even though they're part of the nations. And this is how the multiplication of the nations is going to be joined in. Very interesting foreshadowings, again, of Yeshua coming and bringing the Gentiles into the root. Verse 6, but other sons who may be born after them shall be your own, and they shall be called after the names of these two brothers, and reckoned as belonging to them when they come into their inheritance. And as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died at my side in the land of Canaan on the way, when yet there was but a little way to come to Ephrat. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrat, that is Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, who are these? And Joseph said to his father, they are my sons, whom God has given me in this place. And he said, bring them to me, I pray you, that I may bless them. Now Israel's eyes were dim from age, so that he could not see. And Joseph brought them near to him, and he kissed and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, I had not thought that I would see your face, but see, God has shown me your offspring also. You know, that's just God. You know, he thinks that he lost Joseph all the way back there when all that stuff was going on with his brothers. But not only did he restore Joseph to him, now he's seeing Joseph's sons. Then Joseph took the boys from his father's embrace, and he bowed before him with his face to the earth. Then Joseph took both boys, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them close to him. And Israel reached out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands intentionally, for Manasseh was the firstborn. Now, this isn't the first time this has happened. Jacob himself, you know, had the blessing bestowed on him, even though Esau was the firstborn. And Isaac, Ishmael was really Abraham's firstborn son, but Isaac became the one to carry the blessing. And they say, like the rabbis talk about, why is it that he's discrediting the natural firstborn? Because it's not always the natural firstborn that takes upon himself the heart of the covenant. He's giving the blessing of the continuance of the family to the one who first grabs hold of the heart of the covenant, is basically what he's doing here. But here he's crossing his hands and intentionally blessing Ephraim above his brother, which, as we see in a moment, Joseph didn't really like it. Then Jacob blessed Joseph and said, God himself, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac lived and walked habitually, God himself, who has been my shepherd and has led and fed me from the time I came into being until this day. The redeeming angel, the Amplified has a note that says that is the angel, the redeemer, not a created being, but the Lord himself, who has redeemed me continually from every evil. Bless the lads, and let my name be perpetuated in them. May they be worthy of having their names coupled with mine and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them become a multitude in the midst of the earth. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to move it to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said, not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put your right hand upon his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people and shall be great. But his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. So he's specifically saying that Ephraim is the embodiment of the word that Yahweh spoke to him about the multitude of the nations. So it's the goyim being grafted in, literally, into the tribes of Israel here. And he blessed them that day, saying, by you shall Israel bless one another, saying, may God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you one portion, Shechem, one mountain slope, more than any of your brethren, which I took, reclaiming it out of the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. And then we come down to, he brings in the rest of the brothers. But it's interesting that Joseph comes in first with his children, and the blessing of them takes place before the blessing of the rest of the children. Basically, Joseph now gets 3 portions in the tribes of Israel. He gets his own, and then he gets the ones of Manasseh and Ephraim. So it's like he's bestowing upon him this messianic title, this type upon him that is to be perpetuated into his offspring. But not just his natural offspring, it's also that foreshadowing of those of us who have been grafted in through Yeshua. Chapter 49, and Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together around me that I may tell you what shall befall you in the latter or last days." So he's prophesying their future right up until the last days. "Gather yourselves together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and hearken to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the beginning of my manly strength and vigor. Your birthright gave you the preeminence and dignity and the preeminence and power, but unstable and boiling over like water, you shall not excel and have the preeminence of the firstborn." So it's interesting when you start looking at how he blesses his sons. A lot of them don't seem like blessings at all. It's like, you were the firstborn, but you're not going to be very good. And you start going through it. Let's see, Simeon and Levi are brothers, equally headstrong, deceitful, vindictive, and cruel. Their swords are weapons of violence. Okay? So you're blessing your children on your deathbed, and this is what you're saying to them. Okay. Judah, verse 8, "Judah, you are the one whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down to you." You remember the verse I think it's in Ezekiel, where he talks about the stick of Ephraim and the stick of Judah, and they're grafted together to become one in his hand. The Ephraim represents the nations. Judah represents the Jewish people, the seed of Israel, being grafted together. So it's all right here where Joseph's prophesying that. Judah, a lion's cub, with the prey, my son, you have gone up high. He stooped down. He crouched like a lion and like a lioness. Who dares provoke and rouse him? The scepter or leadership shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh, the Messiah, comes, to whom it belongs, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washes his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. There's more messianic prophecies in this entire Torah portion than there is in all the other Torah portions. This Torah portion has more messianic prophecies in it. Very interesting. Verse 13, Zebulun shall live toward the seashore. He shall be a haven and a landing place for ships. Verse 14, Issachar is a strong-boned donkey crouching down between the sheepfolds. And he saw that rest was good and the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear his burdens and became a servant. Verse 16, Dan shall judge his people. Goes on, he'll be a serpent by the way. Verse 19, Gad, a raiding troop, shall raid him, but he shall raid at their heels and assault them victoriously. Asher's food supply shall be rich and fat, and he shall yield and deliver royal delights. Naphtali is a hind let loose, which yields lovely fawns. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a well, a spring or a fountain, whose branches run over the wall. Skilled archers have bitterly attacked and sorely worried him. They have shot at him and persecuted him. But his bow remained strong and steady and rested in the strength that does not fail him. For the arms of his hands were made strong and active by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob, by the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel. I love that verse. That's one of my favorite verses, actually. By the God of your father, who will help you, and by the Almighty, who will bless you with the blessings of heaven above, blessings lying in the deep beneath. The blessings of your father are greater than the blessings of my forefathers, and are as lasting as the bounties of the eternal hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him who was the consecrated one, and the one separated from his brethren, and who is prince among them. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at night dividing the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each one according to the blessing suited them. He charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my departed people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave of the field at Machpelah, east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan, that Abraham bought along with the field of Ephron the Hittite to possess as a cemetery. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah, the purchase of the field and the cave that was in it from the sons of Heth. When Jacob had finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. Now, I'm going to pause there for a moment because we'll get into the next part of it in a bit. But it's amazing. Here he is, strong up until the time he goes. He dies giving the blessing. Like the blessing is part of his whole life. It's who he is. It's become such a part of him that no matter what opposition came against him, it never succeeded. You know, when he talks about it, when he's blessing his sons, I want to kind of focus on Joseph because that's who we're in the middle of talking about here. But that verse that it says in verse 23, skilled archers have bitterly attacked and sorely worried him. They have shot at him and persecuted him, but his bow remained strong and steady and rested in the strength that does not fail him. Just want to kind of look at that for a moment and then we'll move on. But the archers that they say here, skilled archers, the word actually is the word Baal, which means Lord or God or Master. It's the name for Baal that they use here. In this specific instance, it's talking about those who have tried to rule over Joseph's life throughout his whole life. His brothers, Potiphar, you know, just go down the life of Joseph and you find out he didn't have an easy life. He did not have it all, you know, okay, he got the promise, he got the dreams, and okay, now it's just coming to fulfillment and I never have to go through anything. But he had opposition. But when he comes down to it, what was the strength that Joseph had? What was it that he turned to again and again when he had captivity, this persecution, all this stuff? What was it that he turned to for his strength again and again? Was he dependent on his own strength, on his own bow? No. It says his bow remained strong and steady and rested in the strength that does not fail him. You know, your own strength will fail you in the midst of stuff. Your own strength is not enough. But if you are resting in another strength, that's not going to fail you. When he had the blessing that has been given upon him, that very blessing itself gave him the fortitude, it gave him the strength to keep going on no matter what. So let's continue moving on to chapter 50. Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph ordered his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. Then 40 days were devoted for him, for that is the customary number of days required for those who are embalmed. And the Egyptians wept and bemoaned him as they would for royalty for 70 days. And when the days of his weeping and deep grief were past, Joseph said to the nobles of the house of Pharaoh, if now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, to Pharaoh, saying, my father made me swear, saying, I'm about to die in my tomb, which I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan. There shall you bury me. So now let me go up, I pray you, and bury my father, and I will come again. And Pharaoh said, go up and bury your father as he made you swear. And Joseph went up to Canaan to bury his father, and with him went all the officials of Pharaoh, the nobles of his court, and the elders of his house, and all the nobles and elders of the land of Egypt. So this was quite a party. They went up to bury Jacob. And all the household of Joseph and his brethren and his father's household, only their little ones and their flocks and herds they left in the land of Goshen. And there went with Joseph both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, and there they mourned with a great lamentation, extreme demonstrations of sorrow. And Joseph made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning at the floor of Atad, they said, this is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians. Therefore the place was called Abel Mizraim, the mourning of Egypt, west of the Jordan. Thus Jacob's sons did for him as he commanded them, for his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of Machpelah, east of Mamre, which Abraham bought, along with the field for a possession as a burying place from Ephron the Hittite. After he buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brethren, and all who had gone up with him. When Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, perhaps now Joseph will hate us and will pay us back for all the evil we did to him. So now they're scared. And they sent a messenger to Joseph saying, your father commanded before he died, saying, so shall you say to Joseph, forgive, take up and away all resentment and all claim to requital concerning, I pray you now, the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now we pray you, forgive the trespass of the servants of your father's God. And Joseph wept when they spoke thus to him. Then his brothers went and fell down before him, saying, see, we are your servants. And Joseph said to them, fear not, for am I in the place of God? Vengeance is his, not mine. As for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive as they are this day. Now therefore do not be afraid. I will provide for and support you and your little ones. And he comforted them, imparting cheer, hope, and strength, and spoke to their hearts kindly. Now that's a man of true character. He had everything in his power. He was now in a place of power. He could have gotten back at them. He could have done something to them to make them regret everything, but he forgave it. Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. So
we're going to focus on verse 20 for a moment. As for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive as they are this day. In the Good News translation, it says, you plotted evil against me, but God turned it into good, in order to preserve the lives of many people who are alive today because of what happened. You know, this is a common thing that we say in here all the time. What the enemy meant for evil, Yahweh turns for good. And all of us in here, we all have testimony in here where the enemy was trying to do something evil in our lives, whether it is in our life personally or with our children or whatever. All of us have testimony where the enemy tried to do something evil, but Yahweh turned it around for good. And so that's what we're going to focus on for a minute. You know, this whole story of Joseph, if you really think about it, Joseph, I think Jordan just alluded to this a little bit ago, but, you know, he really had quite the life. He had one thing after another, but it was all not, Yahweh didn't cause any of it. Yahweh never brings evil. But Yahweh turned every bit of what happened in Joseph's life around for good. And it wasn't just for Joseph. We see further down years later, it was for his family. It was for his brothers. But then it was for a nation of people, because he was able to save people during a bad famine. So what the devil means for evil, Yahweh turns around for good. You know, another key note, and we're not going off into this today, but Joseph is also a big story of forgiveness. If anybody, actually there's quite a few people in the Bible that we could say, if anybody had the right to not want to forgive, Joseph was one of them. Okay? Ultimately, we know Yeshua was the biggest one. But Joseph's life, what his brothers did to him, he had every right to be like, are you kidding me? I want nothing ever to do with you again. But we don't see that at all. He's a perfect example of what true forgiveness is all about. But so we know that with Joseph, that jealousy was what caused his brothers to treat him so cruelly. You know, they threw him into a deep pit, and they finally sold him into slavery, causing his father such deep pain. Now, the actions of his brothers against him impacted his father. You know, and I don't know if his brothers were necessarily thinking about that at the time. They were just so enthralled in jealousy, and all they thought about was themselves, and weren't thinking about the impact it was going to have on their father. But Yahweh in his wisdom turned a most awful crime into the most beautiful story, culminating in a glorious finale. Yahweh in his foreknowledge knew all that was to take place in the life of Joseph long before he was born. You know, it was one of the things Mom used to pray all the time. Before the foundations of the earth were laid, you knew us. You knew everything. Everything was already staked out. He already knew beforehand. Yahweh prepared the way for this brutish, bullying behavior of his 11 brothers to be transformed into a precious picture of his protection and loving care for his people. When at last Joseph revealed that he had been made the governor of all Egypt and was in a position to protect his entire tribe for the duration of the terrible famine that was to ravage the world for 7 years, Joseph confronted his brothers, saying, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people." Not only did Yahweh bring him to that position, Joseph kept himself in that position. If you look at through all the different experiences that Joseph had, he had a choice. We all have choices. We can either make the right choice or we can make the wrong choice. Joseph had a choice to make in all those decisions, in all those situations, and he clearly made the right choice in each and every one of them. So Jordan just alluded to this also. Joseph is a wonderful picture of our Lord Yeshua, beloved of the Father, hated by his brethren, betrayed by those he knew and loved, only to be used of Yahweh to save his people from death and destruction, before being placed in the highest position in the land, carrying out the will of the Father. That's not what the devil had intended for Joseph. I think if the devil knew beforehand that Joseph was going to be made, one of the most powerful people in the land, he never would have inspired his brothers to do what they did to him.
Well, didn't it say, even about Yeshua, talking about Joseph as a foreshadowing of Yeshua, it said if they had known, they wouldn't have crucified the Lord of glory.
Exactly.
If the enemy knew the outcome of a lot of attacks against us, he probably wouldn't have dared mess with us in the first place.
But this is not just an amazing adventure story with a happy ending. This is a picture of the wonderful way that Yahweh takes and uses the most painful and difficult circumstances in life, that is to trust in him to bring about good, not only for ourselves, but for the many other people that touch our lives. When evil situations happen to thwart personal plans, we have a number of choices. We can wallow in a slough of despondency, murmur against God for our misfortune, and bemoan our sorry state as we become embittered with our lot. Or, by faith, we can rest in the promises of Yahweh, knowing that no matter what happens in this life, Yahweh will bring good out of evil. He will bring life out of death. He will bring joy out of sorrow. He uses all things to work together for good, so that even when others intend things for evil against us, Yahweh will use it for good, not only for our eternal benefit, but for the benefit of others and to bring glory to his name. So think about it. If we didn't have a God that turned evil into good, all those people would not have been saved during that famine. Joseph would not have been brought to that position to be able to do what he did to save a whole nation of people from a famine. But our God is a good, good God. And if you look back at Genesis 48, verse 16, and you link this to what the devil meant for evil, Yahweh turns for good. When I was reading this, I instantly think of that song we sing, "See the Victory." That's what it's all about. See the victory. What is that line in that song? You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. There's no other choice. He takes what the enemy meant for evil and he turns it for good. But in chapter 48:16 it says, "The redeeming angel, that is the angel, the Redeemer, not a created being, but the Lord himself, who has redeemed me continually from every evil." Doesn't say he redeemed him here and there. Doesn't say he redeemed him once in a while. It says he redeemed him continually. Not from one evil here and one evil there, from every evil. Now link that back to what the devil meant for evil. Our God always turns around for good.
It sounds very similar to what Paul had said in Timothy, where he talked about, I fought the good fight, I've finished my race, I've kept the faith. He brought me through every evil. That's the testimony of these men of faith is, we had evil come against us. None of the people that are in the Faith Hall of Fame had easy lives where the devil never attacked them or anything, but they came through every evil. God brought them through, and that's their testimony. They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Their testimony is Yahweh's continually keeping them.
And this is one of the verses that is a powerful verse to stand on in the days we're in today, because there's a lot of evil going around us. There's a lot of evil going on that the enemy's trying to do in our personal lives. Many of us have experiencing things come against us over the last few weeks or whatever. Because the enemy means it for
weeks,
evil.
few months,
few months,
few
yeah.
years.
I was narrowing it down. But what the enemy is trying to do to take out, destroy, steal, kill, what he's meaning for evil, we got to stand on the fact that Yahweh will always turn it around for good. What do we always say? He has the last move. And it's not over until he says it's over. So I just wanted to read two things that I happened to come across that I thought was fitting with the whole thing about, stories in individuals' lives where it really accurately portrays how God took what was evil and turned it around for good. And this one is probably one of the closest to come to Joseph, this actual true story. So it says at just 16 years of age, St. Patrick was kidnapped by pirates and taken from his British homeland to Ireland, where he was sold into slavery. He worked in the fields as a shepherd for 6 years under terribly harsh conditions, until God miraculously provided a way of escape for him to flee. As difficult as that time must have been, it was during those lonely years of enslavement where he faced hunger, freezing temperatures, and pain that he met God, and found deep closeness in his presence through prayer and meditation. Who would have ever dreamed of how God would turn around this tragedy for good? After months back at home, recuperating and seeking direction for his future plans, St. Patrick felt strongly led to go back to Ireland. He knew God had brought him there for a purpose, and he was burdened to share Yeshua with a lost nation. History tells us that thousands were saved, revival broke out among this pagan people, lives were changed as many came to know Yeshua as Lord and Savior. God is not the author of evil in our world. He shelters and protects us from the evil attacks of the enemy on our lives. He always is faithful to bring greater good. Now think about this. Here's this St. Patrick, kidnapped by pirates. What was going to be the outcome of his life, he was probably thinking. All right, not very well at all. But what did Yahweh do? He turned it around for good, and he ended up bringing many, many people to the Lord Yeshua. Many, many people. Both the lives of St. Patrick and Joseph in the Bible remind us of this truth. Sold into slavery, held captive, and imprisoned, yet set free for the saving of many lives. And this is another aspect of when Mom's talking about, it's not just about us. What we do impacts other people. For us to be free, we need to be free so that other individuals can be free, because it is not about us. Yahweh will turn it around for good. He is faithful to his word. So that was a more of an accurate story, comparing it to what Joseph had gone through. But this one is more kind of like down to earth type of thing. More not really simple, but more something that maybe one of us might relate to or whatever. And, there's all different levels of attacks. And it doesn't matter the level of the attack. It doesn't matter if this is a little one or a big one. Yahweh is not limited. He'll still turn it around.
And he's never caught off guard by it. And he said he knew every day of your life. He knew when the enemy was going to come in and try to bring that attack into your life. He already had the answer there in that position for you, just like he did with Joseph. Like, why is it that at that exact moment, those people went by and he was sold into slavery in Egypt, of all places? Why is it that at the exact moment he came into Potiphar's house? Why is that exact moment there were connections that he had?
And that's why it's so vitally important that we stay in position at all times. And when something does happen, we don't get offended. We don't react back in anger or try to take things in our own hands, because we don't know the end result. He does. He knows everything. So this one I'm going to read now, this guy had the opportunity that what had happened to him, he had the opportunity to handle it with offense, with getting angry. He could have been yelling and done this and whatever, but it would have cost him. Now, so I'm just going to read it to you. It was nearly 11 p.m. at a rental car place. I'd been standing in line with about 30 other people for over half an hour, and my wife was with the leadership team we'd brought for a conference. The people next to me grumbled impatiently. Ahead, one customer at the counter shouted curse words into his phone while his company credit card kept declining. No one was having a good time. Finally, a manager came out of the back room and the line started moving. When it was my turn, all I wanted to do was swipe my card, grab the keys, and get our team to the hotel. When it was my turn, the manager asked me a few quick questions and then said, "Thanks for waiting. I can do this rental for cheaper." It was amazing because the number he gave me was 1/4 of what I expected to pay. I smiled, swiped my card, and we were off. But here's what the guy left out. The rental car service had already charged my card the full amount, and he was just selling me the daily rate insurance, making it sound like it was the full transaction amount. And this was after I explicitly declined the insurance in his initial questions. Sure, I should have slowed down, read the receipts, asked questions, and done my due diligence, so that's on me. However, the manager was definitely dishonest and took advantage of the situation. Because my brain works like this, the story reminds me of Joseph from Genesis. Joseph's brothers had gotten jealous of him and sold him into slavery. The slavers then took him to Egypt, where eventually he was wrongly imprisoned. In time, Joseph became the second most powerful man in all of Egypt, where God used him to save millions of people from a devastating famine. Joseph went from slave to prisoner to prince. Years later, when his brothers showed up begging for food, they realized they were meeting with that very brother they'd betrayed. They were terrified, thinking this now powerful man was going to hurt them. But here's what Joseph said. "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." Through no fault or sin of his own, Joseph had awful experiences in his life. Yet he could still look back and see God's hand at work, setting him up for an amazing purpose. Now, the wrong done against me at the rental car place obviously pales in comparison to what happened to Joseph. I'm not definitely claiming that. But guess what happened? The second night we were there, I backed our rental van into a sign messing up the rear bumper. Sure, that manager had taken advantage of me, but God used it to save us thousands of dollars. Because the guy was dishonest and gave him insurance. The guy still, didn't get a discount on his rental car, paid full amount and stuff. If he hadn't been given that insurance dishonestly, instead of paying another $170, whatever it was, dollars for the rental car, he would have been paying thousands of dollars in damage to the rental car. This is a small example, but remember, our great God can turn what the enemy meant for evil into good, and not just for us, but for others as well. Yahweh was very well aware of what that manager did to him, very well aware that he was, before it even took place, he knew that this guy was going to deceive him and rip him off or whatever. Now, this guy had a choice to make when he found out about it. Most people, what would they have done? Been on the phone with the rental car company, yelling and screaming, saying you dishonest people, you did this and did that. But he didn't do that. He stayed in position. He just went moving along, and he found out why. Okay, now, obviously, you're not supposed to go backing up your rental car into something. You should be paying attention when you're driving at all times.
But he had an answer for his own mistakes.
He had an answer for what he did. He caused it. Now, that manager was dishonest, but Yahweh took what the enemy meant for evil to turn it around for good. Because who knows? I don't know who this individual was. I don't know what kind of church they had or what position they were in, as far as they're obviously pastors or something. But maybe that thousands of dollars they couldn't in the natural afford. Maybe that thousands of dollars would have been a big stress for them. But Yahweh knew that. And he knew that the enemy was trying to do something evil. And he turned it around for good to bless his people who always stay obedient to him and following his word. And that's what the key is. We've always got to stay in position. We have got to stay obedient to him and following him. You get off and doing your own thing, and I got this, and I'm going down my own path, and none of you know what you're talking about, or blah, blah, blah. You're going to find yourself in a very, very dangerous place. Very, very dangerous place. You think you're all that, and the truth is you're not. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing every day, spending time in the Word. I was just listening to somebody very, very recently. I think it was actually Kenneth Copeland last night during Nancy Dufresne was doing her Holy Ghost meetings that started. So I had it on last night listening to it. And I believe it was Kenneth that said, now more than ever. And we've been hearing this across the boards, but there's a reason. You hear it one time, okay. From one individual, okay. But when you hear it a second and a third and a fourth, all across the boards, you better perk your ears up and listen. Now is not the time to get lazy and lackadaisical and careless and fleshy and I'm going to do my own thing. Now is not the time to pull away from Yahweh. Now is not the time, I'm just going to say it, now is not the time to pull away from your spiritual covering. It's too dangerous of times that we are in. Too dangerous. And what Kenneth was saying last night is, you better keep yourself girded up every single day. Now is not the time to have a morning come and be like, oh, you know what? I really don't have time to spend in the Word. I'll catch up on it tomorrow. Maybe back 10, 15, 20 years ago, that might have been okay, but things are a lot different now. There's no more room for error. And the times that we're in, and, there's prophecies that have come forth about 2023. There's good things, and there's not so good things.
It's our choice.
But it's your choice. And for all of us, we can be in that part of the prophecy of the good things if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And that's why, we reiterate it all the time, and there's a reason. Now more than ever, you've got to be taking things seriously. You've got to be staying in position. You've got to be spending time with Yahweh every single day, in your word every day, decreeing and declaring things, spending time praising and worshiping, and making sure you're connected to your spiritual covering and obeying it. Because that's what's going to get you through. One of the most dangerous places for an individual to be right now is to be rebelling against their spiritual covering. Don't even want to know what the consequences would be in a situation like that. But, just what Kenneth was saying last night, you're not going to have God turn evil into good if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. If you're off doing your own thing, like I said just a couple of minutes ago, I don't need input. I don't need this. I don't need that. I know what I'm doing. I got it covered. And you're just going the way of the world, you're in serious, serious, serious trouble. And you know what? The bridge is out there. It is. The enemy already has it out. And he's trying to get the people of God to go down that out bridge. And that's why we have got to be staying in position and smarten up. It's time to, I think maybe this is one of our past sermons where we were reading about Tevet and how it's the time to mature. It's a time to mature. It's the time to smarten up. It's time to be about Yahweh's business and get things right. And we will experience every evil that would come against us turn into good. We will experience what Israel said to Joseph. He protected me from every evil. He didn't experience any evil continually. But we have our part to do. And, we're in 2023. And like I said, now's not the time to be playing games. It never actually really was the time to be playing games. But it's definitely not the time to be playing games because we are in serious, serious times. And if you haven't noticed, the devil has been doing a lot lately. A lot. Not just in this nation, not just in this city, but within this congregation. Why? What does Mom say? If you've been here more than twice, is that what she says? If you've been here more than twice, you're marked, you're targeted. But out of this small congregation, like Jordan said, the things that we have done for Yahweh, the things that we have been victorious in, and just like what she was saying, financially, how this church has been able to financially give this small group of people, and that's been the case for us for years, You know that we're on the right path. You know that Yahweh has got something big and good in store for us. You know what? Others may not. It's all your choice. You may decide, yeah, I'm in. You may decide, nope, I'm out. And that's your choice. That's your choice. But we got to remember that we were all called for such a time as this. And what the enemy means for evil, Yahweh will turn around for good.
You know, when you say about the encountering things in your life, if you never see giants, then that means you're too far from the promised land. No, if you never see any giants, then you're nowhere near the promised land. If you never face a giant, that means you're not doing anything that's worthy of being opposed or resisted. Devil's not going to oppose you if you're not doing anything for the kingdom of God. So the very fact that you're encountering these opposition, these ridiculous trials, whatever might be coming up against you, means you're doing something for the kingdom. You're doing something that's worth something. But, you know, when Joseph had this choice how to respond to each situation, he made the right choice. He made the right choice in each of the situations. You know, get back to the whole thing where it says skilled archers have wounded him. So he's been shot at. He's been shot at by the enemy. And some of these arrows have, I'm sure, hurt. I mean, to have your own brothers literally sell you into slavery. I don't think any of us, we might have family trouble, but I don't think any of us have had our family sell us into slavery. You know, to have somebody that you think would be on your side, to have somebody that you think would come alongside you and be your first person to support you, to have them turn on you like that, that can be something that's very painful in the natural. Joseph could have instantly gotten to a place of, well, I'm hurt. This hurts, and just focused on the hurt, and he would have missed any of the plans that Yahweh had for him. And, you know, he ends up coming into Egypt. He has these arrows that are shot at him of treachery, that he sold into slavery in the first place. But he has these arrows that are shot at him, temptation. Well, he could have avoided being in that place in the first place, but he ran from the temptation. He has these arrows of false accusations that are shot against him. And those, a lot of times, are the arrows that penetrate and can hurt the most. When you know that what somebody's saying isn't right, but you don't know how to prove that it's not right, that can be the most, in the natural, wearying type of thing. It can be draining. And that's exactly what the enemy intends for it to be. But again, we're talking about Yahweh taking what the enemy meant for evil and turning it around for good. And he ends up, even though he ends up in prison based on these false accusations, suddenly he gets an ear into Pharaoh's court. And it's a positioning. Again, if he had been sitting in that prison complaining about why he was there, complaining about what his brothers did to him, it's not fair. You know, I don't know why. God said I was supposed to do this, but he must have abandoned me. And he could have been in that place, and he would never have been positioned or had the ear of Pharaoh. And that would have been Joseph's life. He would have been forgotten in the prison, and that's it. But he chose to respond to it in the right way. And when he gets the ear of the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. I always think of that for some reason. But when he gets their ear and says, make sure you put in a good word for me to Pharaoh, he gets forgotten. Totally was forgotten, until years down the road, and all of a sudden, God turns it around. And that's when he's raised up, and he gives him the answer to the dream and all this stuff, and he's made the second most powerful man in Egypt. Again, if he hadn't responded the right way to the previous things, he would never have reached that position of power. He would never have reached the place where he could be trusted with that position. But the fact that it says his bow remained strong and steady and rested in the strength. Sometimes it takes more strength to just hold your bow still than to just fire off a bunch of arrows. Now think of it, like the way people tend to respond to situations, they're just firing off a bunch of arrows in random directions, and you don't know who's going to get hit, who's going to get hurt, whatever. It takes strength to hold back when you know you have the capacity to retaliate. It takes a lot of strength to bite your tongue sometimes, especially if somebody's like in your face yelling at you or whatever. It takes a lot of strength to bite your tongue and say, I am not the one responsible for their actions. Again, you know, we're talking about people shooting things at you. Well, two wrongs don't make a right. You jump back in the same place with them and start shooting back at them, and it's not going to end up for your benefit. You let vengeance be mine, saith the Lord. But the secret to Joseph's strength, he rested in the strength that does not fail him. That strength does not fail him. Now, it's interesting because I was looking at this thing that was talking about archers in the ancient times especially, and how they were trained from boyhood. They were trained as boys how to handle the bow, how to shoot the arrows the right way. And how they were trained is a father would take a son and have the son hold the bow and the arrow, and he would put his hands on top of his son's hands and draw and teach him the motion, teach him how it felt. So it looked like the child is the one shooting the arrow, but really it's the strength of his father's hand that's guiding him. This is what Joseph's referring to. His bow remains steady, remains strong in the strength that does not fail him, for the arms of his hands were made strong and active by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. Yahweh is taking him like put in his hands and guiding him. But you have to rest in that. That's something you have to trust. Like if the child's fighting against the father, that bow's he's not gonna learn anything, and that arrow's not gonna hit its intended target. But if he's resting in the strength of his father, if he's resting in the fact that he knows what he's doing, he's aiming it the right way, I'm gonna trust him, then it's going to hit its intended target. Abiding in strength signified it's retaining its elasticity unimpaired and continuing in its firm position. So no matter how much he's being shot at, his bow never faltered. It's not affecting him. It's not affecting Joseph at the core of who he is. He is standing strong. And it ends up being that he's sitting on the throne. You know, a faith that dies in the heat of the fire can't sit on the throne in life. If you have a faith that cannot stand a trial, then it's not to be trusted with the prize. You know, you got to have the endurance, the ability to stay strong and finish. It's not just how you start, it's how you finish that matters. Every giant that we encounter, every opposition that we encounter has either two names. It's either an obstacle or an opportunity. And it depends on how you look at what you're encountering and how you respond to it that determines whether it's going to be an obstacle in your way or it's an opportunity for you to get to the next level. You know, if you see there's a block of stone in your path and you can't get around it, you can see it as, well, it blocked my path, or you can see that I can step over it and now I'm on a higher place. A lot of people see that the wilderness is where our testing ground is. The wilderness doesn't make us or break us. It brings to the surface who we really are. So the testing in the pit, the testing in the prison for Joseph didn't make him or break him. It showed who he really was at the core of his being. He already had to have that inside of him, that in the fire of adversity, that's what came out. Psalm 34:19 says, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all." The higher the walls of adversity and opposition, the greater is the supply of strength to overcome them. So if there's a really big giant in front of you, then you know that the supply of strength that Yahweh has given you is even bigger. Because greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. No matter how strong that might seem, you're stronger because your strength is the one who never fails. Yahweh never fails you. And he is the one who causes us to triumph. Triumphant, victorious living is not problem-free living. If you're expecting it to be problem-free living, then you might as well say, "Beam me up now, Lord." You know, as long as we're in this life, Yeshua said it, in this world, you will have tribulation. You can't faith that away. There's going to be opposition if you're doing anything for the kingdom. Sometimes the overcoming triumphant Christian life is not problem-free living, but it is a promised-filled living. If you're so filled with the promise, if you're so filled with where you're headed, and you keep that in front of your eyes, you can overcome anything that the enemy throws your way. And that's what Joseph did. He was made strong by the mighty one of Jacob. The same strength that, as Jacob said when he was blessing them, he said to them that through all these evils, I've come through all these evils and he's not failed me. Joseph had that inside of him. He came through all of the evils that were thrown against him, and Yahweh never failed him. Never once. And he never fails us. So if you're walking in through a season in your life that may seem like it's anything but easy, that it may seem like it's anything but a tiptoe through the tulips, know that you are in a position where Yahweh can turn that season around for something even better. He didn't bring you to that season. The enemy is the one who causes those things, not Yahweh. But he turns them around. And he's turning a lot of things around in our lives. Again, if we hold our position, if we stay where he's called us to stay, if we don't break rank, we don't get out of position, we don't cast away our confidence, as it says, or quit in the middle of it, then we're going to see the victory. We're going to see the end result of our faith, just like Joseph did. Amen? Well, thank you for those of you who joined us today. Trust you've gotten something out of this message. We will see you on Tuesday night. Until then, have a blessed week.